Hey, this is like a Q&A with Dreamfeel. I have myself, I'm Laura. I was the director of the game. Above me, up here, it's like the Brady Bunch. We got all the different directions. Above me is Eve. Hey, Eve.
Hi.
What was your
Uh,
role in the game?
I'm the co-writer and producer for If End. Nice to meet everyone.
Sweet. And then Leah.
Hi, I'm Leah. I'm the artist on the game.
And then Tim in the corner.
I'm Tim, and I did all the programming in the game.
Cool. This is like our second time doing this because we did the Let's Play, but now we're all on
Yeah.
camera this time. So
Hmm.
scary. Well, on the left side over here, which I think y'all have copies of as well, we have a bunch of questions that people sent in over the last while. So yeah, we'll just go through them and see how we get on, and we'll just chat basically. Most of them are if find related, and then there's some other bits and pieces. So yeah, this was like, Alex put the call out on social media. We got questions from Twitter, Instagram, lots, and Facebook, and then she prepared them nicely with these nice screenshots so we can see who asked them. So the very first question is from Josian, who's like a really cool 3D artist and like does cool like shaders and stuff as well. And she was wondering, I was wondering, okay, I'll just read it from like their voice. So I was wondering how you designed and planned out the different visual atmospheres and background styles in If Found, as they really magnified the emotional impact of the story for me. Did you make a storyboard? Did you need to iterate often? So I think this is a tricky question because it's like we did it so differently every single time. Like so some of the sections, like the space sections, they were kind of, I guess they were like semi storyboarded, and we got like art from Claire Morley who had like lots of physical things. But then, yeah, like what was your process, Leah, with like the main game? Because I know there was like back and forth between me and Eve and you, but like it was a mixture of like, okay, we had the script, then you're trying stuff out, right?
Yeah, like I went through the script and did like really rough thumbnails basically. And then I showed you, and then they would kind of be developed further. But they were so rough that I don't know, it was like really loose and stuff
Yeah,
like
it was
that
just
with the
ideas,
writing.
really.
Yeah. So I could kind of go my own direction with the illustration, and then you could adapt the writing, or sometimes the writing would change and it would be
I
recontextualized.
mean, also by the time we were like, doing like all the content that is in the finished game, like all of that got kind of redone from like the summer of 2019 up until release in May of
Hmm.
2020. There was like loads of bits and pieces that we had done like previously that we were like remixing. Um,
Yeah.
so it was kind of like, yeah, it was kind of always like the script came first, and then yeah, like the illustrations, and then um, generally it'd be me and Eve putting it into the game, and if we thought we needed more, we'd go back to you, or we'd be like playing
Mm.
around with effects and like mucking up your art basically.
Yeah. It was kind of like also like going through the stash of drawings, kind of finding old things to be new.
And we did more storyboards like earlier on, I would say, when we were like working out what are all the different parts of the scenes.
Mm.
But yeah, by the time we were like putting it in, it was just like it was more experimenting with effects that like shaders that Tim had done, like distortion and stuff, specifically for the backgrounds. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
also
that's one thing. Sorry. Go,
sorry.
Tim.
I was gonna say that most of the time Leah works in black and white, so color was
Mm.
gonna be added later, and that kind of dictates the mood as well a lot. Um,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
we could recolor things, which was really nice. Like that was kind of like
Yeah.
a workflow we fell into because we had this cool way we could like change the like line color, change the background color. But then also we did have some where like there's only a few in the game, but they're really impactful. Like the house where it was just like, hey Bree, and like Bree got to like color the whole thing, was like that was awesome.
Mm.
Yeah.
Was there something you were gonna add, Eve?
Yeah, just that I think this question like interestingly picks up on the like background textures as a part of the mood of the game. And the background textures are like a wild mix of different things. Some of them are Leah's art, some of them are art by other artists who worked on the game. But they all have like loads of Tim's shaders layered over them. And that was a way, like Laura, you and I spent a lot of time going over those shaders and talking about like exactly how we wanted them to look.
I mean, it was
feel.
almost like level design, you know, like taking like the art and like, you know, making collages and stuff. It was like basically level design. And like actually the next question from Ethan is basically that. So love to know more about the process of tying narrative to the gameplay and your art style. And that's been a chicken and egg situation for him. Like I think what they found and like kind of with Curtin and other games in the past is like kind of they come as a pair, you know. So the art style like was the game essentially, and the game was the art style. So like we knew like when we started working, Leah, like you just like wrote a little bit about the handmade style. Like we knew we wanted to do like that kind of handmade stuff, you know. I mean, what's your perspective on it?
Yeah, I remember it was the brainstorming. We were both writing and drawing in notebooks, and then we were kind of looking at the layouts of those and kind of being like, "This is a cool starting point."
Actually, some of my favorite ones.
So they've always been tied.
Some of my favorite ones were those early ones you did, like for like Stephen, where you did the whole page like layout. So it's a pity we weren't able to do more of those. But yeah, like we knew we wanted it to.
Right, yeah.
We knew we wanted it to be the notebook and be handmade because, like, A, it was like very distinct and different, and secondly, it just tied in with the gameplay so well. So how did we do that? I know, Eve, do you have any perspective on it? I think it kind of came together, and then it's just like you're working to emphasize or like, you know, give it nuance in different ways.
I think there's a couple of like points that I remember from, and this is quite late in development, so really like all of the early stuff that you're talking about where it was like you and Leah working together to kind of prove the concepts and stuff was one part of it. But then when we started getting some of like Leah's finished pieces in, especially I really remember this for the fight scene when like Leah started coming back with these just incredible close-ups of Shams and Cassia that were like distressingly emotional, and that really dictated like, okay, we want these to hit, right? Like to really be physically present on screen and feel really like powerful. So that was then like us thinking about the gameplay and how we could show those off best.
Yeah, it was like really intuitive, I guess, you know, because we have like the zooms and stuff, so it was like, how do we present each piece of art? Because yeah, if each one was just like a layer like straight in front of each other and like you erase and you erase and you erase, like it would get some tiresome, but it's like how it moves from one layer to the next kind of changes it up too.
Yeah.
And there was like, you know, we did like play around with other gameplay stuff, like, but like the focus was always just on the story and the art as like showing the story. So writing the script, how long it took y'all to come up with the story and the dialogue? How many different drafts? How many drafts was there, Eve?
10 million.
Yeah.
It was like, I think it was a really good process, the way that the script writing ended up working, at least after I came onto the project. But it was like incredibly iterative. There are like maybe up to 20 drafts of some scenes where they would just get rewritten and like repurposed, and then you would like be like, oh, like we like this dialogue, but the scene itself isn't working, so we're gonna do a different scene, but like steal some of this dialogue and put it in there or whatever. And loads of back and forth as well. Like I would write a draft and then Laura would like go over it and edit it, or Laura would write a draft and then I would read it and be like, oh, and you know, whatever, like here's my feedback. And so it was a real like loop back and forth, and it's good. You get better games when people are able to like collaborate on each other's writing. It gets stronger.
Also like, you know, the game goes back to the end of 2015, you know, like the very first draft for that first demo, you know, it was like a stream of consciousness that I wrote. But then even like before you came on, Eve, there was like, you know, other people helping out, you know, like Claire Brankin and stuff. So, and the story just changed like radically every single time. And like the way that it worked, it was always kind of, you know, like once you write something, like you're kind of excited and happy to have written something, and then like a week or two later you can look back on it, and we're always just asking ourselves like, did this work or was it what we wanted, you know? And Cassio being trans, you know, wasn't even part of those early drafts, and you know, Jack and Collar weren't part of those early drafts, like, or Cassio's family even, and all this stuff comes in as you're like thinking about and sitting with the story, like what's missing, and every one of those times is like basically another draft, but we didn't set out like do one draft, do second draft, do third draft. I mean, by the end we were, but yeah, there was like hundreds of thousands of words written, but I think the final script is like 15 or 20,000 or something.
Yeah.
Also, like,
I also,
yeah, go on.
sorry. I also remember for the dialogue that you guys said that if you said your dialogue out loud, it would change a lot how you would write it as well, because it would just sound weird.
Yeah, there was like a version where like every character was really snarky or something. Which was, you know, like probably also like a holdover of like Aiden's style or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, like I think like as we kind of got to know the characters more, they started to develop their own kind of like voices. And yeah, like the dialogue specifically, like you say, it's like when you read it and like you talk it out, like it really, like you can hear it better. And I think like when we like, okay, it's set in 93, it's set in Knuckle, then we could be like more real about it. By the way, this question was sent by Cassiopeia, who's a really cool trans girl who took her name from the game, which is like amazing. It's very cool. I will stop like with the rest of them because I only have like, I'll just use usernames because I shouldn't like guess. So I apologize if I previously got anyone's gender incorrect. So yeah, I'll just use like usernames basically. So Paris, Treaty of Paris asks about the music. We had a few questions about the music. So someone else was asking about the musical choices. So we had tried out a couple composers, but it wasn't really quite working. And it wasn't what we were looking for in the game. And I previously worked with Matt. So we were getting close to release, like, or so we thought at the time. But we had you know, like 9 months before release, and Matt had some free time to do a whole soundtrack, you know, and it worked out brilliantly. Like he was great to work with, and it was just a back and forth between myself and him really, and I was sending him influences, and then he just sent music, and it was all like, amazing. You know, there was some times where it's like, okay, this needs more work, it's not quite right. I know I'm like really picky about drums, especially in soundtracks. It's like they can be really overpowering. And then there's like a couple spots where like the drums are audible. Like there's a really cool one. I don't think anyone's ever noticed this, but in the breakfast scene, like when Cassio wakes up in the house, like the instruments come in over the course of the song related to each of the characters. So when Colum shows up, the bass starts playing. And then when you get to to Jack, like the drums come in, which is really cool. So that was like super intentional. And yeah, at the same time we also worked with Ellie, who did like the sound effects and everything, and that was really cool. Like they're really great to work with. So yeah, it was just like, you know, and then the other point where we had drums was like the fight scene, and they're just like so impactful. But yeah, I remember like I was sending Matt like Steve Reiki kind of stuff, like electric counterpoint, which was like a big influence for the fight scene, and that worked out really well. But then also like he came with all his own ideas as well, so it was like a back and forth. And yeah, he's just really great at like melody and you know, sounds and everything. So the band concert, how did we do that one? Also, like there's all the licensed music. So, the band was one of the very first scenes we made. It was the first scene we made with Annapurna. And though the story was quite different at that point, you know, it was always just about expressing that one moment. Like, a lot of the other scenes are about moving the story along, you know? And so it's nice to have a scene where you're just sitting in it. And I think we put in the placeholder track. We were listening to a lot of, like, Irish music to find inspiration or maybe bands that could do the full soundtrack, and we were looking through some deep cuts. And yeah, there's 2 tracks that we used for that scene. One is High Cost of Living, which is the punk song, and then the following song, which is 80s Ramp Walk by Operating Theatre, and they're both just awesome, and like we just kept them in the whole time. So we ended up going with them. And then for the finale, we also like licensed Ensemble Eru, and that was another one where we were looking for a song to do what we wanted. We're going to like create it, but there was one existing that was just perfect. And it was just nice to have like these like actual licensed tracks in there as well, because one thing that was cool about Matt was that I was sending him stuff like Riverdance, so he was listening to Riverdance for the first time, you know? So he's like from Kentucky, and he's like reinterpreting like Irish music with a slightly like strange like distantness, and he's also coming out with like no irony, like you like an Irish composer, an Irish musician like listening to Riverdance would just be like so embarrassed, but he was like, whoa, this is cool.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so that was really neat. And the gig itself,
I think.
yeah, sorry, Eve, you go on.
No, I was just gonna say, I think one thing that's nice about the licensed tracks is that like 80s Ramp Walk and the High Cost of Living are not quite contemporaneous to the period, but they're close enough to it,
Yeah.
right? Like they're within like 10 years of when the game is set, so they feel like the kind of music that Casio would have been listening to in that space, which is really great. And then like Ensemble Area, on the other hand, is kind of more timeless. Like it's a very old song that's being reinterpreted by a contemporary Irish group. So it has like this kind of legacy and history to it, which plays, I think, really nicely into some of the stuff that comes into the ending.
Like Salog is like doing Shanno singing, which is a really old type of Irish singing where it's kind of just all about the ornamentation of the voice, and usually it's kind of unaccompanied. And we wanted to have that because this was the ending when it's like all the future possibilities open up. We wanted to have that past, but like a version that's like, you know, not so like just looking to the future, and it's kind of like new and exciting.
Yeah.
How did we come up with the parallel plots? Eve.
Yeah, it sort of emerges, I think, from initially the way that Leah drew Cassia, which was as the astronaut, and partially it's just like such a striking visual. Like this is like kind of looping back to that other question about like narrative and visuals and gameplay and how they intersect. And sometimes you just have a cool idea and you're like, I don't want that cool idea to not exist anymore. So how does it fit into the story? And I think there were different versions of it that we went through, but as we explored it, it was both like a way of talking about some of the stuff that's going on in a slightly more abstract way that maybe lets people get a different perspective or a different angle on it. And it's also like a really necessary like pacing breather, because some of the stuff that Cassia is going through is so hard, and then having the chance to kind of be in this more like Doctor Who, like 90s sci-fi era kind of stuff is just like fun and refreshing and like a bit of a break. And but then the way that they come together at the end, ideally and hopefully, is about like talking about possibility and talking about constructions of self and talking about like how we find space for ourselves through imaginative play and how that can help us in real life as well, I think.
I think there was always...
Laura, do you want to...
Yeah, so there was always, you know, like the heart of the game like started with the black hole, and that was always there. And we had this like sense of scale and everything. And that was always where the game was going. And I think like the threats that Cassiopeia is kind of up against are kind of they kind of also like ties into the like, you know, the ending of the game where like Cassio kind of more and more dissociates from reality. And basically it was the solution to a problem, which is how we have all these different parts working together. And as you say, like, you know, from like a pacing point of view, it's a break. But then also from a story point of view, it was let us like dovetail in and do some other bits and pieces. So yeah, no, I was really happy with how it came together. I think there's some things we could have probably explored and explained further, but like the finale itself with Cassio, and essentially the black hole and the self-annihilation is like perfect. And yeah, there's like a cute little story between Cassiopeia and Mac, which you get to see a little bit more of later when Cassiopeia keeps coming back for Mac. But yeah, it was like that juxtaposition was cool because like the main story kind of went in a more realistic direction, so then the fantasy went in a more fantasy direction, so we kind of like split up, and yeah, it became two stories that kind of hopefully crash together. So someone wants to know, Fake Geek Queer wants to know, how did you, Dreamfeel, get created? So basically it started, like, I mean, at least the name started, it was like me. I think the first game with the name on it was probably Curtain. I don't think there was anything released before that had the name. And, you know, I had been like working solo, I guess, under my name. I'm actually, now that I think about it, it's probably also because my name was changing, and I didn't want. I remember there was like contracts I was doing at the time where I was like, "Hey, can I be credited as Dreamfeel rather than like?" So it's like, and they were like, "Seems strange, but okay." So that was one reason, but also like I had been working solo. I knew that I had to start, you know, that like, okay, like maybe I can do like art direction, and like, you know, I do that at Dreamfeel, but I can't draw, you know, for love nor money. So I need to like, you know, start working with some people, and also like as one person who's like chronically ill, it is very hard to make a video game by yourself, even if you're like, I don't know, Derek Yu works with people, you know. So the start of it really was in 2015. Curtain had been out for a year, I guess, when I started seriously looking for people to work with, and I kind of like after Curtain I was like maybe Curtain could have been sold on Steam and made a little bit of money, but it would have been really hard to make a go at it. So yeah, I was looking for someone to work with. And yeah, I worked with a couple artists, but it was when I started working with Leah, and Leah was like super chill and nice, and she didn't have any idea what she was getting herself in for. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, did you?
I
like,
do not play video games. Well, I did not back then.
But like
at all.
I mean, I think you're like. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Your sister had like seen like an article about Curtain on Polygon or something, which was cool.
No, my sister had played it actually.
Oh, nice. That's class. And yeah, like what did you think at the time? I mean, you probably thought this was like a month or 2 months, like max, or what?
Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks or something, and I was quite stressed because my idea of what a video game looks like, I was like, how am I going to draw everything?
Yeah, I think I just wasn't committed because I was like, oh, I don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, no, but I was happy with that. Like, I was like, cool video game. I was just like, whatever that looks like.
And then, like, you know, we had a couple years where we were working on projects. Like, If Found was the first one we spent like lots of time on. Actually, we went to Game City in Nottingham with like a different project. Can't believe that was so close to when we started, which was like the predecessor to If Found. But yeah, like we were like through good times, bad times, where we had more clear direction or not. But we made If Found, like the demo. And that like was really well received by events and by like awards and stuff. And then we started talking to Annapurna, and then like everyone else started joining us. Although like we had worked a bit with Eve as well in before a lot in 2016, and so then it was like in 2019 it was like, can I curse? I hope I can curse. Alex, edit that out. There's no point for cursing. So in 2019, like we were definitely like having struggles with the game, and Eve was someone who was like, yeah, this could work. And actually you had started working with us to help us with some writing, and then it was just like, oh, it became more and more and more. Yeah. So what was it like to work with Annapurna? Did you approach, or was it the way around? So they had just like been announced, so this was the start of 2017. And I guess they've been working behind the scenes for a bit. So they started working with Giant Sparrow to publish Edith Finch, and you know they're starting to look for like more games. And they had like a few in the lineup. I got a chance to go to GDC with a scholarship. And while I was there, I was like, oh hey, let's like pitch publishers, and Annapurna was by far the most interested, and like just like the nicest. I think like one of their team, Nathan, had seen an announcement we had made of the game and was like curious, but it wasn't really until like they all played it that they were like, oh yeah, this is perfect. And working with them was really good. You know, they were super supportive. They really understood what we wanted, and when they didn't, they were like, okay, you do you. And yeah, it was good. It was a good experience. Yeah, it was nice when they got to come over to visit us in Ireland. It's pity we haven't been able to do that since, but hopefully sometime.
Yeah.
So how long did it take to make If Found? Leah, do you want to answer this question?
Yeah. I remember being emailed in September 2015, although we started If Found about a month.
I think it was like November.
Later.
Yeah.
Oh, was it? Okay. And then we worked on If Found. I don't know. We kind of switched projects over the years.
Yeah.
Maybe I can't remember this. My memory's
No, we basically made like the demo. I remember actually the very first like playable version of the demo was in January of 2016. And I remember showing it to someone and being like, "Oh no, it's terrible! Like everything is over." And then we figured out some like mechanics and ways to make it work, and it came together really nicely. And we finished that up like March, April, and like some polish. And then we put it aside. We started working on it again for a few weeks in September to polish it up for like the awards. But we really didn't start working on it seriously after that until like autumn 2017. And I was still teaching, so that was the tricky thing about all of this, is that it was super part-time. Like Leah, I guess you were working like a couple days a week. I can't remember how many. And I also had like all my teaching commitments. And really in 2018 is when we went full-time. And yeah, that was wild. And like Tim, you joined in like June 2018, June, July, something like that. So
yeah, because you were doing too many things, right? Wearing too many hats.
Yeah, because I was also the coder and like yeah, literally everything. So I would say like it took like 3.5 years or something, with lots of gaps in between. Yeah. So, what was the inspiration? I think we've talked about this a bunch, and like the next question is, what was the inspiration for?
Basically, the next 4 questions are all, what was the inspiration? And
there was no inspiration.
Money. We were like, oh, what is the most lucrative game that we could possibly make? What is the biggest money spinner? I know. I mean, it's a good question. Like, did anything inspire the storyline, like real events? And it's like, you know, and there's always the question, oh, is it autobiographical? And it's like it's not an autobiographical story. But I think like as a writer, you're always like pulling from your real life, and I think, especially I think like kind of the emotional center has to be something that you've experienced at least in some way. I mean, what do you think about that question, Eve?
Yeah, it's interesting. Because there are a lot of touchstones from my life as well in like the little fragments of the game, like trying to get at the specifics of the West of Ireland and that kind of feeling of it. But the way that it all comes together, and sorry, so trying to say 2 things at once. The way that it all comes together is always like alchemical, so there's always like change as you write stuff, because the characters aren't you, and they go to different places than you go, and they like experience different things. And then also like we tried not just to draw on our own experience, but also we talked to different people for the game, and did interviews and stuff like that. And yeah, I think I don't know. And then like you always end up pulling on other fiction as well, right? Like you want to bring realness to it, but also you end up being touched by things and thinking like, oh, that's cool. Like that inspires me. I want to make stuff that feels like this.
Yeah, like
and Yeah.
it's always a process. It's always a process of like figuring out what feels right, you know?
Yeah.
Like we did want to create like a messy game that wasn't just like super like either rote or simple or like too oh everything's gonna be great, you know? Uh but at the same time, because it is a fiction, it is, you know, naturally a lot more time compressed and simpler than real life. You know, like my real life wasn't as neatly structured as something like this, but you know, there's elements of my life in there for sure.
You mean it didn't take place over a single month through the
No,
artificial construction of the diary?
no.
Wait, so you weren't an astronaut?
I mean, there's only so much I can say, Tim. You know, like I don't know if you know that Ireland has a secret, a secret space agency. Then inspiration for the game generally, I came from like, you know, me and Leah come from comics, and like zines, and I had this mechanic I was playing around with, which could like cut through things, and then I realized, oh, if you only cut through, like if you only like hide the topmost thing, it would look like you erased it. And so what if you could actually control what you're doing? So then that's where the eraser mechanic came from. And with the eraser mechanic and the diary, you know, like those are the two key elements. And it's like, okay, who is this character that's erasing her diary? And I think we had like that was the inspiration. And we're like, oh, like she's kind of dissociating, you know, she's having trouble with relationships, but we didn't question it like further. We kind of like started focusing on all the events that happened to her. But it's like the story really started to come together when we're like questioning it further, which was like, oh, actually, this is Cassio. She's trans. She's like struggling with her family and stuff. Rather than just like, oh, a series of events, which was kind of the shape the story was before then. There were nice events, but yeah, it wasn't the story that we see now. Yeah. Okay, let's hop on to like some more random questions. Pictochat. Does everyone know what pictochat is?
No.
What's pictochat, Leah?
From what I remember, it's basically like on the Nintendo DS, you could there was a little tiny chat room,
Yeah.
but I think only like 4 people or something could join it. But you could also, with the stylus, draw.
Yeah.
And I think it's developed further with the 3DS, and it's gotten more.
Well, the 3DS is like defunct now too. It's pretty like it doesn't still exist.
Yeah.
Like the Switch does have a touchscreen, but it was a little chat room like for like local Wi-Fi, or I don't even know if it's called Wi-Fi, if it's like between like the systems like that.
Is that the thing where if you walk on the sidewalk next side by side, you get a little message or whatever?
That was kind of related to it, but not exactly. This was like an actual chat room. We were doing it at the same time. And I think so, you know. I think we always knew that a touchscreen would be perfect for If Found. I remember when we showed it the first time in London, people were always like, oh, put it on a touchscreen. And it definitely is. I think the one thing in pictochat, which I think is kind of cool, which, you know, I think is represented in If Found, definitely in the diaries, is the scribbles. And wanting to put scribbles everywhere. Like, we actually came up with a system. Well, actually, no. Well, I think I did this before you came in, Tim, and it was like horribly broken. And we kind of repurposed and recreated it for the end game. But a system where you could just like draw onto like this levels and just add scribbles everywhere. And then that definitely became, you know, when we always wanted to have the creation aspect at the end, and scribbling and drawing everywhere was definitely a key feature. I don't think we get to show it off enough, because the thing that happened was, you know, when there's a part where you had to draw, players would just skip it instantly. So, like, yeah, we're like, oh, maybe you got to fill up a draw meter, and until you draw enough, you can't progress. But then people just scribble. So we just made it like kind of a nice bonus. But I think there's definitely space in the future to do more with those kind of things. So yeah, pictochat definitely. Like, I love those like experimental DS games like Electroplankton and stuff. And I think like, yeah, there's so many ways that touchscreens could be used more. But it's just
So
like
was
the
the game
feedback.
was our game impacted by pictochat?
Well, that being my extension, like the extent of me playing video games was on the Nintendo DS. So
yeah, totally. It's true. Like the DS and like, you know, just like expanded, like you played video games and stuff, like for sure. and like what video games could be, you know? Like even now, like there's so many questions. It's like, is it found a video game or not, you know? And it's like, pictochat's a video game. Yeah, so I think it founds a video game also. Any tips? I mean, video game, like it's like when I was at the dentist the last day and I was trying to like explain like, oh, I run a video game studio, and then I'm like, oh, there's story games or whatever, and like a video game about like Ackle Island, and it's like it's both like people who play games and people who don't play games are like, video games can only be this tiny thing, when it's like, no, there's this whole like world of possibilities. Any tips for an aspiring game dev looking to make narrative-driven games exploring complex topics? Yeah, I mean, I've been talking a bunch, so I have thoughts, but like Eve, if you want to go first.
Yeah. Make games yourself and put them on the internet. Talk to other people who make games and be chill. Don't be rude. That's very important. Don't make games for free unless you are doing it for yourself. If someone else is asking you to do writing, they should be paying you. It takes ages. It is good to have a job on the side. You don't need to feel bad about having a job on the side. Like everyone I know in the games industry has worked other jobs as well, at least for some of their time. And a lot of people I know like still do kind of multiple jobs. That's just how it goes. On those sort of more like, if you want to talk about complex topics, you should. That's great. Please do more. I'm begging you. I want to play these games. Don't be afraid of being messy. Like, it's okay to be honest. You should be careful and considerate and like think about the people that you're writing about, and like think about yourself and think about these things carefully, and like consider your impulses. But you don't have to have all the answers, and it's okay to like sit with a question and be like, I have this question about life or about people and I don't know the answer, but I want to think about it.
I would say it's more interesting and valuable to like explore questions rather than give answers, you know? I think like it's a trap to fall into to try and represent ideas in mechanics directly, because then you're just giving answers and you're kind of like, you know, like a sim or something. You're like, oh, if only everyone like stopped eating toast, like would save the environment or something. You know, there's like a direct link there. Whereas I think it's more interesting to try and like recreate scenarios as like deeply as possible. So someone who's struggling with a toaster, you know, could tell you more about that situation rather than just trying to encode. Like, you can have mechanics, but just have them trying to recreate moments and situations rather than trying to encode your messages into the mechanics. Because even if you're like, oh, I'm representing everything, it's totally a sim, it's totally unbiased, it's like, nah, there's like loads of bias there, you know, like we're swamped in bias like constantly. And the most interesting, you know, takes and complex topics are the ones where, you know, it is just trying to like recreate a situation and like people can read into it like differently, essentially. And then yeah, your other advice about just make lots of small games. So like, again, don't get like too bogged down in big ideas. Like, you know, the smaller the idea, like the more useful.
Yeah, fervently
on that note, maybe it's interesting for a narrative-driven game to, you know, use tools like Twine to quickly iterate and
Yeah.
you know, use simple tools that you're not fighting your tools to make your game.
Yeah.
Don't have any barriers to you know, you don't need to learn to program or anything like that. Just, you know, use Twine.
Yeah. I think exactly. Like, I think like as a game designer and as like even as a narrative designer, you know, you need to be able to get in there and like make stuff yourself. You don't need to be able to program, but if you ever want to be like working in a team and like, you know, like running a team or something, like having made stuff yourself means you will know what programmers can and can't do, you know, and you'll be able to understand that better. Like even like Miyamoto, like in his like 1998 like GDC talked about like having that kind of knowledge of like making, and so you don't go like and ask Tim a really silly thing. Sometimes I do anyway, but
Tim is a wizard, and I refuse
but
to
making stuff
understand
yourself,
anything.
I think that's
Yeah.
ideal. You know, like you can like get a notebook and write down an idea. You know, and I would recommend Bitsy is another really good one. That one has like art and stuff, and it's like a really vibrant community at the moment. There's just like all the most interesting games coming out of it.
Yeah, and I would shout out Rempe as well. Like Rempe can be kind of inaccessible, but if you have ever like done a HTML web page or anything like that, you can probably learn Rempe. It's very similar.
So we only have a few questions left. One which ties into something we were saying earlier. This is like three posts from the same person on Instagram. Hey, love your games. Tarte a la tulipe. It seems to me like an amazing yet very niche game. Is it always easy to say, we're going to make a great adventure about self-discovery, although you could make a game that would sell more? Like, I'm very glad you do, but I figured it must be hard. It's really hard to, like, you know, we're in a lucky position where we are, you know, we're running our own studio, you know, and okay, while I'm like technically the boss, probably, you know, like hopefully everyone has like a lot of input, and we're making stuff that we're into. And often, if you're working in games, that is not the case. And because I'm the boss, I guess I can say, screw making something commercial. But it's hard to get excited, and it's hard to do it. You know, I think like if I was working for someone and they were telling me to do this, I would probably find it a way to make it interesting and to do it, you know, and that might make it niche or not. But I think the thing that like makes our games like or at least our games to date slightly more niche or like hard to pin down is because we don't want to just do what has already been done, and like we want to create like new kinds of games, and that's where like you run up against you know, if we were to make like a roguelike or something, there's like definitely games I want to make which are probably like, I always talk about my like bouncing ball game every so often and that's like a little arcadey kind of game.
I'm
you know?
Excited for the band.
Yeah, maybe in a few years. But like, yeah, like we're in a position where like we got like funding to make this game, and like, I don't know, did we make choices that could have made it more or less like palatable or mainstream? I don't know. Eve, I don't know. Do
The
you have
thing
any
I would
thoughts?
say, yeah, I have one big thought, which is you can make the most like commercially successful conceptual like game that, you know, you're like, this is going to sell 1 million copies, and it can sell none. Right? Or like sometimes like Among Us is kind of a good example where it came out and no one paid any attention, and then, you know, a year and a half later suddenly it got picked up and they got very lucky. But it's luck. It's all luck. Even if you try to follow every rule of like what sells, you can completely flop. So to a certain degree, yes, there are things that are like you said, Laura, like if you're trying to do something really radically new, then you're probably going to have a smaller audience, but there's limits in both directions. And you just have to make what you're interested in, because otherwise it sucks. It's bad. Don't do things just for money. It's not fun.
Do you have thoughts, Leah?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think the art for this game would be very different if it was like outside of my comfort zone. Like if you like hired me and was like, please make this like 3D combat game and stuff, and I'm like, this isn't my style, like I don't know what I'm doing, I don't draw like this. So I think definitely when you're interested in it, it makes it richer.
I think for me, like the major focus.
Fighting game, though, Leah.
Sorry?
I do want to see your fighting game.
Oh yeah, maybe.
It's nice
like what Laura said.
It's nice being thrown in different directions. But for me, the main focus, which always comes down to like, awards or like success, that kind of thing, is like, I kind of just want to like focus on the well-being of like essentially the team, but like the week to week to month. Because if you get too focused on like the big moments, it's like, okay, let's kill ourselves working at this. You know, we're going to make everything so this is going to be a huge success. And it's like, okay, if it's not a success, you feel like an idiot, you know? You feel like a fool. And then if it is a huge success, you're like, oh crap, now what? You got to do it again, you know? So I think like success, like that can, like obviously we want to be able to keep making games, you know? So if we make good ones, hopefully that'll happen. And we want to make ones to sell. But the main thing is just having like a really nice team that's like sustainable and working, rather than we all burn ourselves out. And making a game that we enjoy is part of that, I think. And that like includes like challenges, you know, and includes parts where like, you know, like even over the last few months on our new game, like we go through these cycles where, oh no, it's terrible, oh no, it's the best thing ever, oh no, it's terrible again, you know. And it's like, okay, maybe not too much of those. But yeah, I think it's a balance. I think like if you're like trying to set out, as Eve says, to make something which like you think everyone's gonna love, because I mean, like for example, like
So much pressure.
it's so much pressure.
Yeah.
Like there was a while where like multiplayer games, you know, like co-op multiplayer, everyone thought it was gonna be the next big thing, and then like so many individual developers made co-op multiplayer games, you know, and like that must have hurt so bad. You know, like, you know, some of them went on and made like Untitled Goose Game, and then they got awards for best like first game, even though they had previously made a co-op multiplayer game that not many people had played. But it was awesome at events, you know. So it's tricky. And I think to us, you know, it's like my partner always says, you know, okay, we don't have the most fans in the world. We don't have as many fans as like Call of Duty or something, but we have the best fans, you know, and the people who care. So it's like I'd rather like affect a few people's lives like enormously than like a lot of people like, that's on my phone, you know, it's nice.
It's on my phone.
So
Indifference is the worst. If you make your game and
Yeah.
nobody cares.
I think for like us, we're just gonna like keep making titles, and we'll have like a nice catalog, and people go back, play our old ones, and like each one of them will be kind of like special and different. So it's like it's a very hypothetical question. I think it's a question where like we can't really do anything else, you know. Like if we were in a position where we were trying to do what everybody else does, then we're not going to stand out in any way. You know, our publisher would be like, you know, why are we working with you? You're just like everybody else. So yeah, we just like, you know, be weird, be ourselves, and you know, try and improve the quality of life for us, because we're just people. What was a major drive for making it? So Tim, do you have any thoughts on that one? A major drive for making If Found?
No. Why does the program need to answer that?
I don't know. Like, I know the question, like, you know,
I mean-
is like, more personal, but also at the same time, you know, like, was there something that you wanted to get out of the project?
Yeah, for me it was. I guess my previous job wasn't the best, and I was looking forward to working with a more intimate team. Also, my best friends came out as trans around the same time, so it was also very interesting.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And it's
And I guess for myself, it was also good to work and be distracted from life as like a form of escapism, because life can sometimes really suck.
yeah. I mean, that's it. Like, there's like happen, so like as much as we can, hopefully, like work doesn't have to be one of the things.
Actually, can I add to that?
Yeah.
That a major drive is that, for me personally, is that Dreamfeel is like a really sound company, and I really wanted to stay throughout the project because, as Tim said, like an intimate team. Nice.
Like
Eric.
Laura cares, and you can feel it, like she cares, and I don't know, it's special what we have.
Oh, that's good. I know, like, Leah, you've gone through points where you're like, oh no, am I going to be fired because I was sick for a day or something?
Yeah, or like, yeah, there was. When the project would change and stuff, I would worry and stuff. But
I know. I'm
no,
like, you're used to it now, but I'm really guilty of like changing things massively every so often. But yeah, it's never like a personal thing usually.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that. I'm used to it now.
That's fun.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, here we go.
Here we go again. Eve, do you have any thoughts on, like, for you, any kind of major drives?
Yeah, like I would agree with everything that has been said already. One thing that I was coming to personally was like I was doing a lot of kind of contract writing at the time when I started working on If Found, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really fun and I enjoyed doing it. But it was like in a very specific genre, in a very specific style, to a very specific standard, and getting a chance to like flex my writing muscles a bit and be like, oh, this is something that's much like more meaty and not deep in that pretentious way, but like there's more to this, and I'm going to spend more time on it and really dig into it. That was great.
I mean, with that project for you, it was just like, okay, I got to create lots of stuff really quickly.
Right, exactly, and no time to edit.
That's really useful for us because like I am not good at producing lots of stuff quickly. But in this project, yeah, it is just sitting on it and like redoing stuff, which is good. So, are we planning to make a sequel to If Found or a whole new one? I think we talked about, like, I don't know, like, if there's any cool indie developer, I probably shouldn't say this, but maybe, if any cool indie developers, like, we could, like, you know, like, you can make an erasing game, we'll help you with the tech or whatever, you know? But I don't think we're gonna make another erasing game.
There is one future project that's based on a part of If Found we didn't really get to use.
Yeah. So like a major like part of If Found kind of like as Leah said, is one of those things that was like in a major change. Was like, okay, this doesn't fit anymore. Like both for it's not the most important part and it's like too demanding. And so another game was born out of that. So we have a project which is kind of like a handmade, hand-drawn kind of game in the vein of If Found, with some very different mechanics, which is awesome. And we have a whole story. We have loads of work done for it, but we kind of put it aside because we didn't want to be pigeonholed into the diary game team. So probably, I mean, this goes back to the commercial thing. Probably if we were smart, we were just like, oh, let's do this like simple game next. But we also wanted to challenge ourselves. So that's the closest thing to a sequel.
That game that you're talking about doesn't really use If Found's characters, right?
No, it doesn't use the characters, but it's like it uses like some of the mechanics ish.
I kind of think of it as a spiritual successor because, like, because of the mechanical connection and like some of the stuff that we've talked about in terms of story is like responding a little bit to If Found and what we got out of that. But yeah, it'd be completely new characters and it would be like basically unrelated, but just if you played them, you might be like, oh, I can see parallel similarities here.
The other part to that was also just because it was going to be like our next game like has like gay and trans characters, but it's not really the focus. The focus is the rest of the story. I mean, so far, like that might change, you know, it does. But with that other game we're talking about, that is like a more unapologetically trans game again, which would be cool. In a way that like If Found was like kind of sad. This is more of like a rom-com, which would be nice to do. But we shouldn't say too much. We should make it.
Because everything is subject to change. Just entire stamp over this. Everything is subject to change.
But we are working on a new video game. We've been working on it since like last autumn. And, you know, as Leah said, it's gone through a few of those phases where everything gets thrown out and redone again. Even our publisher is like, this last thing was so nice, why don't you go back to that? But no, it's like, no, it's not what we wanted to do, but it's really cool now, and I think we're all happy with it. It's ambitious, and it's experimental, and it is very, very different to If Found, so there's more games coming.
Yeah.
So, final question. I thought like going through all these questions, I thought we'd have to like, you know, chit chat about other stuff more, that there wouldn't be enough questions, but like we're reaching like almost an hour, so this is like a perfect length. Thanks for doing this with me, everyone. This is so cool because like, you know, we're so used to, well, we're not recently, but like we all used to be in the office together, you know, and it's such a different vibe, and we do chat like every day, but not that much, except me and Eve because we're on call all day. So
we talk, but we don't chat as much, right? Like a lot of our talk is very work focused.
Yeah.
It's nice to kind of have this like hangout space and like be chatting in public. In public.
We never really talk about the game, you know. Like once we finish it, we're not really like. I mean, there's like things I'd like to go back and like tweak, but it's like pointless, you know, until we get to do our special edition.
Okay.
So has anyone gone back and played it, found, or what has it been like playing it like since finishing, whether finishing in May or finishing in October?
I haven't played since October, apart from the Let's Play that we just did.
And what was that like doing the Let's Play?
Fun, good to go back to it. It's, I don't know, it's interesting. I feel like I still need more time. I'm like, I want to go back to it with genuinely fresh eyes, and I'm actually not there yet. Like, particularly for some reason, the music, whenever I hear the music, I'm still instantly in like QA mode. Because I
Is this
spend
what
so much
reminds you
time
of?
listening to the music during QA, yeah. So I need like a little pause to be like, okay, and then maybe next year I'll go back to it, and then it will feel like something I didn't make anymore, and it'll be, I think that will be really exciting.
Leah, you've
Yeah.
had... Oh, sorry, Tim, you go on.
So no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Leah, you've had a couple experiences of this because you've had, like, leaving the game, coming back to it, and then even finding some of that old art in the game again and kind of making peace with it. But, yeah.
I played, I don't know if I played, I must have played like immediately after game release or like right before or something, but because I'm not like in the taking part in the programming or the playtesting and stuff like that, I feel like I really saw it with fresh eyes. I'm like my art with the writing and stuff and the music especially, so I definitely cried at the end. I was like, oh my god, even though I had drawn those things a while before. Yeah. So
That's cool.
I haven't gone back to it. It was too impactful. I'll play it, I think, in the anniversary.
So you didn't finish it, or?
Oh, I did, yeah, and I was crying. I was like, oh my god.
No, like Doggins had my partner had a real tough time trying to play it because you just have to stop because it was too much. Tim?
So, of course, playing it for me personally, it's hard to switch off my programmer side of finding bugs and fixing bugs. It's really hard. But watching like Let's Plays or like Twitch playing the game, that is really satisfying for me because you can see the impact of what it's doing to the player itself, and chat goes crazy when certain things happen.
Cool.
So yeah, for me that does a lot. Once in a while when I see that somebody streams a found or whatever, I might watch it and sneakily say something like hello.
Yeah, like so I find streams really hard to watch, honestly. Generally,
for me it's easiest. Yeah.
But yeah, it's good. It's nice.
Have you played it recently, Laura?
I mean, sometimes I like not as much recently, but I have it on my like iPod or whatever, and sometimes I'll just like turn it on and like, you know, make some doodles or whatever. But yeah, it's mostly when I hear of it through other people, because yeah, I'm all about the next one. But it's nice, you know, it's nice. Yeah, like I know, like I talk year off Eve with things I'd like to tweak and change. So that's the only time. But yeah, I'm just really glad when people have a nice experience every time, you know, it means a lot.
Yeah.
And I am really proud of what we managed to do. You know, it was like a heck of a journey to get here. And yeah, like I'm just kind of amazed, honestly.
Yeah.
It's
a weird feeling, both like, yeah, like I relate to what you said, Laura, and also to Tim, of like going into it and being in that mindset of like, what would I change now? What would I do differently? How does this hit? And also just being like, holy shit, it's done.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I mean, like the game, it is, like I say this all the time, but it's like the result of the time that goes into it, you know? And like you know, like maybe this scene's dialogue is written like this because I woke up on the wrong side of the bed one morning, you know? It's like, it's just a culmination of all of this time. So it's like, looking at the game is like looking at like at least like the last 3 years of development from 2018, you know? I think 2018 was a hard year, and 2019 and 20 was tough, but like a bit easier. So yeah, it's been a good journey.
Finished, not perfect.
So I knew If Found was initially more episodic while in development, Does this mean the game used to have longer and different storyline from the full released version? How many episodes of this game, if it was episodic? How many characters were cut or didn't get used? And then there are two other questions that we've kind of already answered. One is just about inspiration, and the other is just why we set it in the 90s.
We didn't really say why we set it in the 90s.
No, we haven't.
I mean, like, for like the quick short answer is like, it was just like a time when like Ireland was changing a lot, and you know, both like economically, but also with our attitudes towards stuff, we were like moving out of being a very kind of Catholic country to being a very business country, and yeah, it all just felt very right, you know, and it's kind of a period drama. And obviously, like,
I think,
as I said, homosexuality was decriminalized only then, you know, which was like a huge thing. So like these things which were like in the shadows and not to be talked about were suddenly starting to be like opened up.
Yeah, I think that if you think about the time period, like from 2020 when the game was released to 1993, it's like it's long enough ago that we can kind of comment on it from a safe distance, but also close enough that at least like you and I had some familiarity with the time period and kind of the touchstones of that time period. So
and setting things in like a specific time period is kind of nice. Like it gives it more identity than or at least it feels like it gives it more identity than just the present. What was the other question again? The different versions.
Kind of episodes and characters. Like, so what didn't we get to use?
By episodic, it wasn't going to be released in chunks, but more just the story would be like a story of a character, that would be a full chapter, and then the story of another character, that would be a full chapter. And each one was Cassio like meeting a different character, and each one of those would end with the end of the world, essentially, and Cassio erasing everything from existence, and then the next chapter. And that was the focus at the start. We had the kind of like town map, we'd have different characters around. And like, I mean, Leah could probably speak to this best. We had like created maybe like 7 or 8 characters, and each one was going to have like 3 little episodes or 3 little stories each. And we had blocked loads of them out. They would have been
so
way
big.
Shorter. I know, it was wild. But they would have been so much shorter, you know. It would have been more like the diary that we have now in between sections, where it's like this happened and this happened and this happened, but with more art and stuff. Leah, how much do you remember of those far off days?
Chance was originally one of those characters that Cassio would just interact with at the start.
Yeah.
And I think maybe they would come back at the end. There was the twins who were in the band. They had their own chapter, and they were can I reveal that they were vampires?
Yeah, totally. Or were they?
There was also Stephen.
Stephen was like the biggest character who had the most work done that's not in the game.
Yeah.
And Stephen was kind of like an upper middle class, or maybe even upper class, like kind of posh person who lived in a mansion, pretended he lived in a shack, and went out fishing, and you'd go out in a boat and it'd be a crazy accident, and he had like this very dramatic like wild sister with big like long kind of bridal train as well, and this kind of like flooding. I mean, maybe that's where the mansion came from, because that was before we had the house that Cassio lived in with like, you know, that was before we had Crohan House, so maybe that's where that came from. I never realized. And then there's a couple other characters who we never got to spend much time on. There was Psychic, who was a little short, not too short, but like short non-binary person who would see in all the different chapters, and before you finally got their chapter with them. And I think they were like the child of a funeral director, if I remember correctly. I totally forgot about that. Then there was one who was like at this point we're starting to get into like varies where they didn't get much development. I think the ones that had the most development were Chance, the twins, and Stephen, and then Psychic a little, and then there was like I think one other character or two. Oh, actually there was it Sophie or something? Not Sophie, but there was the girl.
Super Train.
Sorry?
There was Super Train.
Super Trains, yeah. Super Trains was great too. Super Train's chapter is gonna be all like photos that got
Oh yeah.
redone. And actually, me and Leah went up into Dublin Mountains. This is only like a couple weeks after we started, and we took loads of photos and stuff and loads of reference up towards like the Hellfire Club, which is a very spooky location. And yeah, her chapter was about going through the forest, finding like tape cassettes that her girlfriend had left her before her girlfriend had moved to America or something. It was very complicated. There was like all of these were just their own little episodes, and there was loads of them. What was the main part of the question? Just how long it was going to be, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of answered everything that was asked. It was just kind of general
it was a totally different story. Like Cassio's family didn't exist, Colin and Jack didn't exist, and it was just like Cassio who like lived ? Meeting each of these characters. Chance had Chance's family existed a little bit, but he had an only dad, and his dad was kind of grumpy. And as we like developed Chance's character, that didn't really make sense. So Chance's family started, becoming more real. So like this kind of really represents the changes that a video game goes through. At least one was like such a long gestation time as it found, and it was like a process of figuring out what was the important parts.
Speaking of kind of like spiritual successor stuff, I do think that idea of like just this game where you're meeting these different people and like you get kind of interconnected stories, but they're also separate is a fun one. Like I'd love to get back to that at some point.
There's so many games would be nice to do. Yeah, hopefully in the future. Maybe after this one we can have multiple teams or something. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right. Yeah, I think we answered loads of questions, and it was really fun. Thanks everyone for sending them on. It was really nice to do. Thanks to Alexandra for organizing all of this and also editing this video that you're now watching and it's on streaming. So I think it's the end of the festival too, so thanks for being part of it. I hope you liked all this content, and this really comes back to like, like we're doing this because it's like a fun thing to do, and like we all enjoy doing it, hopefully. So yeah, we're doing it for you folks. So thanks for being interested in the game. If you haven't played it, I hope you go play it. And if you have played it, I hope you tell all your friends. And if all your friends have played it, I hope you tell all their friends. And send the whole world. Yes. That's the trans agenda. So sweet. Anyone got any last words, Eve?
No, thank you so much.
I feel like if this is a podcast, what we say is like, and where can people find you?
Yeah, God. Dreamfeel X is our Twitter account.
Yeah.
You can follow us there. Alex runs it. She's amazing. She does like all our social stuff and posts lots of art and stuff. And it's good and chill. You should follow it. Some of us have personal Twitters. You can find those if you try.
Yeah, fair.
Good luck.
Yeah, like Dreamfeel X is the place to be.
Yeah, you guys like Leah's got a really great Instagram with all of her own art as well, and that's under LIADDH. But yeah, Dreamfeel X is for all the Dreamfeel stuff on Instagram.
Yeah, we're on Instagram as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, that's right.
Sweet. All right, take it easy. Hope you all have a nice day. Thanks for joining us.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.